Well, welcome to Alyosha Society, my friends. We're going to keep on pursuing truth, beauty, and goodness through great literature. I got to tell you, I'm a little sad. No, I know, I know. I say this at the end of every book. First of all, we're going to be done with a fascinating book and great discussions. Last time I get to wear the green. I don't really get to wear the green a lot. Here we are. Let's dig in. Guys, I got so much to cover in this lesson. Let's get right to it. Did you do what I asked you to do? Remember, I asked you guys to sort of think through, like, what's the message of this novel? What do you think she's doing, and so forth? Let's get into it. First of all, we are looking at the final chapter. So volume 3 from chapter 7 and on. So remember, this should be familiar to you guys, right? Frame within a frame, Russian doll within Russian doll. Outer frame, Robert's writing these letters to his sister. And there are multiple inner frames, either Victor telling his story or the creature is telling his story to Victor, who's telling his story, the villagers, monster, Victor, Robert Walton. So story within a story within a story. You got all that. But notice here, chapter 7, Walton writes this letter to his sister after Victor ends his story. And at this point, the whole thing gets kind of really crazy. Walton's men are about to mutiny. I mean, they've been gone. It's cold. Okay, I don't like cold weather. They've been away from their families. Victor tries to inspire them. We're going to see the expiration of Victor. Yeah. Victor actually dies, and the monster, in a very creepy scene, comes and just sort of mourns over him and vows to Walton that he's going to kill himself. Yeah, the creepiness doesn't really end. But if you look over on 202, at least in my version, that's where you're going to see now we've been sort of we slowly peeled the onion in a sense to get to the core. Now we're kind of putting it back together again. Now we're coming back out to the outer frame. And you'll see there that on page 202, that is the end of Victor's account to Walton. And we're back out to where we began at the very, 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 very beginning. Walton writing the last letter to his sister. And it all comes to a head. Victor ends up dying. The monster vows eventually that he's going to commit suicide. And I'm going to go to 216. But soon, he cried, the monster, with sad and solemn enthusiasm, I shall die. And what I now feel be no longer felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. My spirit will sleep in peace. Or if it thinks, it will not surely think thus. Farewell. And he sprung from the cabin window as he said this upon the ice craft which lay close to the vessel. He was soon borne away by the waves and lost in darkness and distance. Okay. What did you come up with? Well, before we kind of start wrapping the whole thing up, I got just, a little bit of bonus, bonus material here for you. Double bonus. Remember I told you earlier in the story to look at the names of those villagers, those people in the hut, the cottage that the creature observed, and then he stole food from them, and then he felt bad about it. Felix, you may have figured it out. Okay. Felix means happiness. So that's the name of the woman. Remember the girl's name was Agatha. Well, agathos in Greek means goodness, the good. And then Saphi is a form of a Greek word, sophos, which means wisdom or knowledge. Now think about it this way. What exactly is the significance of the fact that the creature is rejected by Felix, happiness, Agatha, goodness, and Safie, wisdom. It almost takes us back to the John Bunyan days, doesn't it, of Pilgrim's Progress? Where the people are named after exactly what they represent. But yeah, these are all things that the creature was denied, at least from his perspective, denied by his creator, by Victor. Victor did not give him happiness. Victor did not give him Felix. Victor did not give him goodness. Remember, he wouldn't create the woman. And whatever wisdom or knowledge he had, the creature obtained on his own. So definitely no accident here, guys. This is one of those things that it's too obvious. Mary Shelley definitely intended to communicate something on a deeper level with happiness, goodness, and wisdom. Felix, Agatha, and Sophia. Okay, where did you come up on the plot arc? We already talked about the exposition, rising action, murders of William, conviction of Justine, her execution. Climactic moment, you remember? Death of Elizabeth, definitely. Falling action, the aftermath, his illness, the sort of unpeeling of the onion as we come back out to the outer frame. That is our falling action. And then the departure, the commitment to commit suicide, and then the departure of the creature at the end. That's our resolution. Now, does that mean that all ends are nicely and neatly tied up? for those of you who've been with me the whole time and we did Jane Austen, this is not a Jane Austen novel, is it? No, but I mean, it's interesting that Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey and Frankenstein were published at the same time, within a year of each other. And look at the difference. Look at the difference, guys, in a Christian worldview. And here it is. I knew I had it somewhere. A Christian worldview doing Gothic and a non-Christian worldview doing Gothic. Here we have a picture of the gospel. Here we have a bride and a bridegroom. Here we have all the makings of a Christian worldview. But then with Mary Shelley, not so much. And we're going to go through all the, sort of possible interpretations of Frankenstein. But I think the fact that these two novels were published within a year of each other is absolutely fascinating to me. And it really highlights the differences between the two worldviews. So let's get into it. What are some ways, based on the historical biographical approach? Now, remember, guys, the reason I taught you the historical biographical approach is because what's going on nowadays in the university is students are being taught to just interpret literature according to whatever agenda you want to use. Maybe it's an LGBTQ agenda, maybe it's a feminist agenda, maybe whatever the agenda. Well, I don't believe that we should impose upon a work of literature a meaning or an interpretation that is something I want it to mean. If that's not really where the author was headed, then let's not do violence to the authors. To the extent that we can discover authorial intent, let's at least talk about it. So, based on all that we've done in these 9.5 videos, let's look at some interpretations that I think could be plausible. Knowing that this was a time when medicine, science, and technology was growing and increasing, could Mary Shelley have been communicating that we need to be careful about where it's all headed? Do we have it contained? Or are we just going to kind of just, let the cat out of the bag, Pandora out of the box? Could Frankenstein be a sort of warning about how we can possibly allow our technology. Now, look, I'm not saying that Mary Shelley had one of these. This could be an application of the message, but she did live during a time where there was sort of, a significant amount of advance in technology, and maybe she could have been saying, hey, we need to be careful that our advances in technology are not like Frankenstein's monster. Yeah, we now have the ability to do this. First of all, does that mean we should do it? And second of all, even if we should, how? Okay, fair enough. I think I'm okay with that. So if you're going to go with the technology theme, then you would ask the questions, well, then what principles should guide us in, quote, keeping the monster from escaping the laboratory? From a Christian perspective, we would look at biblical principles and we would say, okay, all right, let's go with this. Does my use of the technology recognize that the true and living God rules and is in control of all things? Or does it encourage the scientist or mankind to replace God, to now become God? Guys, we could look at this when it comes to bioethics, to advances in technology that have to do with things like stem cell research and cloning. And, to what extent is man trying to replace the true and living God with our advances in technology? Secondly, does the technology violate the sanctity of human life? You see, it doesn't matter how advanced our culture becomes, we are still beings who are made in the image of God. That is never going to change. So, even if we're flying around in flying cars or saucers or tubes, I don't know, whatever, we're still made in the image of God, and human life is special because of that. Now, you could even hold up the 10 Commandments. You could say, okay, let's just walk through the 10 Commandments. Does the technology, or my use of the technology, can I honor and completely obey the 10 Commandments, the very commandments which are a reflection of God's nature and character, and at the same time still use this technology? If the answer is yes, then it's probably okay to use it. So that's where we would go with that one. All right, let's look at some other interpretations of Frankenstein. Again, I think these are consistent with the historical biographical approach. So first of all, I think it could be, now, keep in mind also, guys, that it could be all the above. Mary Shelley may have been, bouncing around 2, 3, or 4 big ideas in her mind when she wrote this novel. But let me just give you my proposals. Is it a novel in which Mary Shelley is advocating for romanticism? So why would we conclude that? Well, we talked earlier, I did a lesson on Walton and Dr. Frankenstein, Victor, as representing the intellect, science, reason, the intellect, and the female characters and the creature himself, Margaret Elizabeth, the female creature, as maybe representing the heart or passion and emotion. So you've got this battle that has gone on since the beginning of time. Should we be more reasonable or should we be more emotional? Some people are naturally more reasonable. Other people are naturally more emotional. So is that something that Mary Shelley could be doing here? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that would explain all these passages we looked at, which sort of deify nature. And Mary Shelley is saying that's a good thing. I'm promoting that. That's my message. Fair enough. Let's go to the next proposal. And I will try to somehow get myself out of the way. Is it possible that Frankenstein was meant to be a feminist manifesto? What do I mean by that? That it's just simply, Mary Shelley's efforts to promote feminism. So what is she saying? Well, look at all the males. What the males do in this story is cruel, is unjust, leads to destruction. But what the females do accomplishes the opposite. So if there had been a creature bride, or a bride creature, whatever we want to call it, it would have tamed the creature. Safety, wisdom, knowledge. Elizabeth, the female characters are kind and smart, and they're the answers to the problem. The male characters are the problem. Maybe in a slight twist to the feminist manifesto theory, maybe it's about social issues in general, which would include feminism. So remember how the creature wrestles with poverty. Why is there poverty and blah, blah, injustice? Remember, he also wrestles with the Native American situation and how poorly they were treated. So maybe through the eyes of the monster, Mary Shelley is pointing out that we should be more concerned about these social issues. Fair enough. I think that's very, very possible. So finally, maybe the novel was just meant to be Mary Shelley expressing her own feelings about her own life. So maybe Mary Shelley created the monster to be a picture of herself. Remember, she was rejected by her own father. So in a sense, her creator rejected her. Remember when she ran off with a married man? When she ran off with Percy Shelley, who was still married to Harriet? Yeah, Godwin was horrified. William Godwin was horrified at that. And it's almost like she was trying to win back his love for the rest of her life. Maybe she felt rejected living in a society that she would have viewed as misogynistic, a society where she had these feminist views, and she did. Remember, once again, her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, even though she died 10 days after Mary was born, Mary Godwin, I should say, at that point, read all of her works and wanted to honor her mother by living out the ideals that she wrote about. So, could Frankenstein be a pro-romanticism novel? Sure. Could it possibly have been a feminist manifesto? That fits. Or could it also have been simply a picture of Mary and her own struggles and her own interpersonal issues? Yes, and it could be any variation of these combined. These are interpretations that I believe line up with a historical biographical approach to understanding literature. So I'm not turning it into something I want to turn it into. You see, from this perspective, that would sort of be like me as an evangelical Christian turning the novel into an intentional presentation of the gospel. Well, that'd be crazy. That's not what it is. There's no doubt in my mind that Mary Shelley would not have intended that. There's no evidence to support that. All right, hope that's helpful. So if it is a, pro-romanticism novel, then what Mary Shelley wants us to wrestle with here is she wants us to kind of wrestle with the head and heart issues. I'm just going to kind of throw out some bonus material here. So, in the Monday night discussions, or if you're having discussions on this in a co-op or whatever the case may be, which should we follow, your head or your heart, or neither one? Oh, you know what this reminds me of, don't you? Oh, man, I think some of you know where this is headed. What is the Enlightenment? Well, remember, the Enlightenment puts emphasis on reason, logic, intellect. Romanticism puts emphasis on feelings and the heart and nature. Well, which one should I give more attention to? Oh, I know. Some of you know exactly where I'm headed for this. Oh, now you're remembering our days with the Pilgrim's Progress, aren't you? Remember the quote from John Stott? We must beware equally of an undevotional theology and this all goes back to the same tensions that we've talked about quite a bit. I got to be careful that my worldview isn't all head or all heart. It has to be a healthy balance between the two. Remember what we said happens if you let one outweigh the other? The undevotional theology just means you're an egghead. It means you just have knowledge, but it's dead. It's not really worth anything. It's just, it's good to show off at parties. But if you have the opposite, you just have heart or devotion or worship, but no mind, no facts, no theology, then you have idolatry, because you're basically just living on your feelings. You're just, I love God. I don't need to read any theology. I don't need to read the Bible. I don't need to know anything about God. But, I love him so much. No. Don't do that. Then you don't even really know who is the God that you're actually worshiping. That's why we say it leads to idolatry. Oh, I'm pulling them all out, man. I'm pulling all the old stuff out. Remember this one? You can't have doxology without theology. I'm just saying the same thing like 100 times. Doxology, theology. Theology, doxology. They're all kind of sort of related. Doxology actually means the worship of God. But our worship of God should be informed. Enlightenment, romanticism, I say that they're both wrong. They're both two sides of a coin that should inform my worldview, which is a Christian worldview with Christ at the center of it. Oh, you knew it was coming, didn't you? Oh, we can't get away from Silhouette Man. Oh, Silhouette Man says, oh, yes, I've learned all about the Enlightenment. I've got all these wonderful facts up here in my head. I'm very logical. I'm very rational. Oh, but do you embrace it in your heart, Silhouette Man? Oh, the romantics might teach you a thing or two on that front. But from a Christian worldview, it has to go beyond even the emphasis of the Enlightenment and the emphasis of romanticism, because the Christian worldview says that you should have head and heart and feet. You know it, you embrace it in the core of your being, and then you live it out. Ah, yes, true faith has to have all the above: understanding, embracing, and walking. Yeah, notice how many of our lessons have come back to this core issue of finding balance. Biblical. The president of the college I attended used to say, friends, we need to remain at the center of biblical tension. That's what I'm talking about. Keeping them in balance. Yeah. Okay, really quickly. I've got just a couple of passages I want to read to you from Charlotte Gordon's book, Romantic Outlaws. I think I mentioned this book to you before. And she has some other theories, some other ways that I think we could interpret the novel. A couple of quotes from her. Having almost lost the man she loved, Mary found the themes of Frankenstein even more compelling. When she showed Shelley the pages that she had written, he urged her to develop them, into a longer story. Encouraged by that, Mary allowed herself to imagine Frankenstein more fully, tapping into her own experiences as a child. So this kind of goes back to the autobiographical approach. I'm okay with that. Whose mother had died after giving birth. Her father had rejected her. Society had condemned her for living with the man she loved. So she explored her interior life, her rage, her hurt, her pride, and at length added the brilliant plot twist, the surprise that would set her story apart from others and make her one of the most famous authors in English literary history. Instead of regarding his handiwork with pride, she had her young inventor be repelled by his creation, abandoning his, quote, completed man in horror. Now, Charlotte Gordon goes on to say that if Percy Shelley or Lord Byron had written this story, it seems unlikely that they would not have ended it that way. That's not the way they would have set it up. In fact, in the words they began that summer, Byron's Manfred and Shelley's Mont Blanc and Prometheus. Remember, they all did this because they had a Lord Byron proposed a ghost story, a competition. And so these are the names of the ghost stories that they wrote. See, they're not nearly as famous as Frankenstein. Yeah, the female definitely won out in this one. Both poets invented creative protagonists whose abilities made them seem heroic. She had given birth to a toddler she loved, and she also had lost a baby, and she lost her own mother as a result of childbirth. If men could control life and death, then she would not have suffered these tragedies. On the other hand, she wondered what would happen to the special role of women if it was possible to create life via artificial methods. She was also concerned about what would happen to God, or the idea of God, the mysterious mystical power behind nature. So Charlotte Gordon goes on to talk about how she was haunted by these thoughts. And then she says, Mary's story had evolved from a tale of the supernatural to a complicated psychological study with multiple perspectives. It still blows me away that a 19-year-old wrote this. She had moved from exploring the creative power of humankind, a favorite theme of Shelley and Byron, to plumbing the depths of human nature. That's pretty cool. I can't, if you've turned into, a Mary Shelley fan as a result of this study, I want to highly recommend Romantic Outlaws. Just a lot of really, really cool insights. And then finally, I think this is going to be our wrap up. She says this, and this one's a little bit longer. My apologies. Walton's decision offers a hopeful alternative to the disastrous choices made by Frankenstein and the creature. Really, really fascinating interpretation. I know you're probably tired. Hang with me here. Although Walton sees himself as a failure for surrendering his quest, remember he was exploring the Arctic, he is actually depicted as a hero by Mary for freeing his sailors and listening to his sister. Unlike Frankenstein, Walton proves himself able to protect those who are close to him. In part, this is because Walton has learned from Frankenstein's story, but his change of heart also stems from his relationship with Margaret, who has cautioned him against the voyage from the beginning. This is a fascinating interpretation. Interestingly, despite the importance of her viewpoint, Margaret appears in the story only indirectly through letters of her brother. Remember, we don't have any record of her letters. A structural echo of the role of most women and what they were forced to play in the lives of men, one step removed, distanced from the action. So Mary Shelley is basically saying, yeah, this is what it's like to be a woman in the early 19th century. You're kind of like Margaret. You don't have a voice. But invisible though Margaret is, her cautionary words are crucial for creating a counterpoint to the unchecked ambition of male characters. And Walton's letters to Margaret add an invaluable commentary on the central drama. What matters most, Mary implies through Margaret, is not the quest, not the search for knowledge or justice, but the relationships that we have with those we love. The importance of Margaret's character is underscored, watch this, by the fact that Mary gave Margaret the initials that she would have if she were married to Shelley, M.W.S. Margaret Walton Sackville. Remember? That's her name, M.W.S. So those would have been Mary's initials as well. Mary's three-pronged narrative, her Russian doll, hey, she mentions my Russian doll, technique of nesting one story inside another gives the reader three different versions of the same events. I'm going to skip over just a little bit. Who's the hero? Who's the villain? Who's right? Who's wrong? Monsters, says Mary, are of our own making. Last paragraph. We're going to wrap this up. Mary dedicated Frankenstein to her father. in yet another effort to win back his affection. But the book was also an expression of longing for her mother, a longing that had been intensified by Godwin's harsh treatment, her dad. Mary was sure that if Wollstonecraft had lived, she would never have severed their relationship as Godwin had, her dad, and as Frankenstein had with his creature. Now that she was a mother herself, she could not imagine cutting herself off from a child. Fathers, though, seemed able to reject their children without even a backward glance, or so it seemed to Mary in the fall of 1816, as day after day, Godwin maintained his flinty silence. She poured her sorrow and outrage into this novel by spelling out the consequences of Frankenstein's rejection of his son. Like Mary, the creature has only a father, and his father fails him. Did you see that connection? The creature doesn't have a mother. The creature has a father, in a sense. No, that same was true of Mary. Her mother died 10 days after she was born, leading the creature to seek murderous revenge because his father failed him. In a world without mothers, she suggests, havoc reigns and evil triumphs. Wow. I think that is still consistent with our historical biographical approach. These are fascinating lessons and possible interpretations of Frankenstein. Way more to come. If you're doing the Monday night version, all the questions I've been tossing out there, we'll roll up the sleeves and grapple with them. But I really do hope you've enjoyed Frankenstein. I would encourage you to read other works by Mary Shelley. I don't think that they are quite as good as Frankenstein, although The Last Man is a fun novel to read. I think oddly enough, she might have been at the height of her powers when she was 19, 20 years old. Anyway, well, the green's got to go. We'll see what color is going to fit our next book. Friends, it's been a joy. It's been an absolute joy. See you when we crank up our next book.